What's up, guys? This is Corey with the Dirt City Gym, and tonight we have an interview for you with the man, the myth, the legend, Will Post. How are you doing, Mr. Post?
It's going well. How are you tonight?
Doing well. So, a few questions I wanted to ask you.
Yeah, of course. Ask away.
So, do you want me to get into the fun questions or the more silly questions first?
Hey, we can start however you prefer, If you want to start fun and get serious, that's fine with me.
Okay, so how do you go about blessing pack pools?
Usually just get the tag and drop in a good luck and call it a day on that. It doesn't get more complicated than that. People ask me for luck and I throw out a good luck and that's about it.
So, you don't have any special juju or anything?
Nah, not that I know of. My pulls suck, so it must just come from me.
So, what would you say is your favorite Pokemon?
So jokingly, in Burbank, I tend to go with Bidoof. I don't know if you noticed my post earlier, but I had a whole bunch of Bidoof cards that somebody sent me. And I enjoy kind of joking around that the quad Bidoof is the best deck in the format. I don't know what made me take the Bidoof. Primal Clash was one of the first sets that we got to pre-release for because we started the game a couple of years ago. So I know Primal Clash had that nice half art Ancient Drake Bidoof and. It's a goofy card, but the art's nice, so I think I took to it back then. I guess if I were to pick a Pokemon that seriously enjoy it, it's probably Lucario. It was a neat Pokemon again from around when we started. That had come out of Furious Fists, and the Lucario EX was a neat card, and it paired well with a few different decks, and did well competitively for me at a couple tournaments. So probably those two.
All right, so moving into a little bit more serious questions now. So, how would you, in a couple just sentences, go about how you got involved in the Pokemon community?
Sure. So we started playing probably about 2.5 years ago. My son started to bring home cards from summer camp he was going to, and after a while of him asking to buy individual booster packs, and just kind of pulling these cards and have them sit around, I decided that just based on having played a little bit of Magic when I was a kid, that we should be doing something more with the cards than just having them sit around the house. So now, instead of having just a couple booster packs full of cards around the house, we have piles and piles and piles of cards. Because we got out to league, and the league owner there, got us into the game, and then we started going to tournaments locally. The first tournament we went to, my son went 1-5. We switched the deck last minute at my suggestion. I had no idea what a meta game even was, let alone how to plan for it. And his only win that day was when his opponent was a no-show because we didn't know that people dropped after, 5 rounds of not winning. So, but then at the end of the tournament, he asked when we'd be able to go again, and so that was what kind of got me hooked, I guess, on the competitive Pokemon scene for him. And then I found Burbank maybe 6 months after that, and just kind of started tagging around there and getting to know some of the community members there, and started judging now about a year ago, which has kind of gotten me a lot more involved in seeing a lot of the different faces that I interact with in Burbank. So it's been a slow escalation over the past couple of years. My son qualified for his World's Invitation last year, so we went to San Francisco. He's about halfway there this year, so he's working hard at it.
So, what age range is your son?
He's in juniors, so he'll be in juniors for a couple more years. Yep. So that's the long story how we got involved with Pokemon, I guess.
Cool. Could you tell a little bit about your judging experience, like how long you've been doing it and how St. Louis was compared?
So that's the third regional that I've judged all this year. Last year I judged cities and states. Last year, I say, last competitive season, I judged cities and states. So about a year ago now was when I was judging states. St. Louis was the biggest, simply because it was the biggest TCG regional we've had. But this year, I've judged Philadelphia, I've judged Fort Wayne, I've judged St. Louis. And by the end of the season, I hope to have Madison, Wisconsin under my belt as well. So, yeah.
So going into that judging aspect, St. Louis was our second regionals. I went to Dallas as well, and Dallas ran fine. But compared to St. Louis, I mean, St. Louis was just a great experience for me personally. This, like I said, this is only my second regional, so I don't have a lot to compare it to. But just a lot of the input I've seen on Burbank and other places like that, just everyone talking about how great St. Louis was ran. compared to a lot of other tournaments that have gone this year. What would you say, from your experience being on that staff, kind of helped make that the experience it was, and what could Pokemon learn and if Pokemon venues learn going forward about how to emulate that type of experience?
I think a few of the factors here, and this is almost Monday morning quarterbacking for me because, I'm not an organizer. I organize locally smaller events like League Cups, but obviously that doesn't scale even close to what a regional looks like to try to plan for. But what I've noticed, differences between what I saw at St. Louis and have seen in Philly and other regionals that I've participated in, it just seems like Team Yeti, the Cracklers, really know that they need a lot of staff. So I feel like they staff to a higher capacity than a lot of the other organizers do. They know really well what their or what their staff and the strengths of the staff are. So they know where people need to go and how they're going to serve the event best, and they place them in those places. They kind of tiered the staff a little bit for the Masters division in terms of judges. So we had our head judge, and then we had 3 seconds to the head judge. Actually, we had four because two of the seconds were bouncing back and forth between table judging the stream and being out on the floor. And then those seconds underneath the head judge all had teams of judges. So we were kind of assigned to different parts of the room. So that kind of kept us able to track the room a little better and get to calls faster and wrap things up faster so that people didn't need massive time extensions, which I think helps keep that round turnaround time pretty low. Because I think that's really important. If you can't turn around your rounds fast, your round 1, 2, and 3 might go really fast. And then you break for lunch, and then you come back and everything's a disaster because people have that like post-lunch slump and they're sluggish and maybe they're a little more tired than they were in the morning, so they start to make mistakes. When you're facing more than 3 losses, that's when you're starting to lose the opportunity to get money or points. So things get a little more stressful. So if something maybe could have been resolved quicker earlier in the day, now they're really like maybe like look, I need a call in my favor, or I'm going to lose my mind. So the judges get a little more taxed at the end of the day. So we were able to get to calls really efficiently. And then just in the morning, we totally overstaffed check-in. I'm sure you went through the line and it felt long, but I think it went pretty quick. We got all the decks checked right away. So overstaffing that check-in, I think, and I say overstaffing, it's not in a negative way. It's just saying, throw as many bodies as you can at check-in, just to move them through faster. I think all those factors contributed to great success there. It just seems like knowing where your staff is strong and placing them in those places really makes a big difference. And then just having enough bodies on the floor, which some organizers struggle with. Not necessarily through the fault of any of the organizers that struggle with it. It's just sometimes you've got regionals where people bail, just like you would with any other organization or business. So
Yeah, well, everything just felt like super smooth. I mean, we had 700 and something masters compared to Dallas, where we had 500.
right, yeah, we as the staff were fairly proud of that. We moved it was 705 masters. Round 9 ended at 10:30, and we had a lunch break, which is it was cool.
Yeah, having that lunch break really helped. We didn't have one of those in Dallas, and we finished about the same time. And I know from personally, just that around 6, 7, I was exhausted.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, the first regional I went to was Lancaster Regional, so it was where Philly had to move one year. So I went to Lancaster Regionals, and I remember in round 7, my mind was blown. I was like, "You guys want me to play 2 more rounds of Pokemon after this?" And I remember at the end of the game, my opponent and I had gone to a draw, and I was like, "Dude, I gotta get out of here. Like, I just can't even mentally take this." So I was like, I signed off that he had won the match because I was like, "I'm out of here." Which is funny to look back at now because obviously judging 9 rounds is it's a long day. But like I said, I got to round 7. I was like, "Nah, I'm good. We're done."
So going into St. Louis, obviously this is the second tournament where Sun and Moon is legal and all of that. Did y'all have a lot of worries or have any problems come up with like GX as a mechanic?
Mhm. Um, so ahead of time, we had a lot of discussion about this in the staff group about the GX mechanics, and we're keeping an eye on Anaheim as well, because Anaheim was the first regional that had GX mechanics, although it was in standard, not expanded. So there was a lot of discussion about it. Obviously, they got ARG to sponsor tokens for everybody so that nobody had an excuse not to have a GX marker. I think we anticipated it to be a bigger deal than it turned out to be. I don't remember a single judge call coming up in our kind of post round huddle every round where
Yeah, I know just around me it was never an issue.
yeah, yeah, nobody. Like I said, I think we thought it was going to be stressful that people would try to pull it off like more than once, or it'd be a he said, she said. Like, they totally used Mad Bull GX, and they're like, no, I didn't use it. In some of those cases, you can rewind the game to kind of determine, like, all right, there was one big one hit knockout, but that was about it. So, there it was. There was your Mad Bull GX or something like that, but. I don't remember any of the judges ever bringing up that it was an issue. We all our issues are pretty typical issues of, just player interactions and people misplaying and making mistakes. So it might be an issue going forward as people get more comfortable with the GX mechanic. They might also get more comfortable in trying to say, like, totally didn't use it that last time I used it, so this is the first time I'm using it. As people kind of get more comfortable and just kind of having it out there and trying to pull off shenanigans with it, but.
I didn't really see that many GX Pokemon being used anyway. I wonder if that is just something to do with expanded or just the new of the set.
Right. Right, and I think that's another just an issue of comfort. Again, you'll see as time goes on. I think you'll see more people incorporating more GX Pokemon. Not only just in the fact that we only have one set and we're going to get more sets, but just because the ones we do have, people are still trying to figure out and kind of solve like the puzzle of, hey, which of these are good, which of these aren't, how can we make these work? I'm sure you've seen over the weekend someone's PC put out the indication that they had like a Wobbuffet Espeon GX deck, and Espeon GX got tucked into Mewtwo in Anaheim, but was not the star of its own deck, and now it is. Obviously, John Kettler incorporating Tauros and Decidueye in one deck, gave a few more GX options, in that Vileplume list. So as time goes on, I think they'll start sneaking into more and more places, but people are probably just kind of afraid to even use it because it's a weird thing. I mean, people haven't had it. They haven't had an attack they can only use once in a game. It's strategically different, especially when it's something like Hollow Hunt GX, where you can grab cards back from your discard pile, which is fantastic. But like, when do you choose not to place damage with an attack? Because we're so used to just attacking every single turn and doing damage. I mean, there's no. I can't think of an attack other than Junk Hunt with Sableye and Sableye Garbodor that people are using that doesn't actually cause damage to advance the game state. So getting something like Hollow Hunt GX fitting in there is just kind of a weird feeling compared to what we usually get. Obviously, Mad Bull GX is pretty straightforward, but a lot of the GX attacks are a little more nuanced than that.
So obviously this is, with the new rotation and everything like that, this is our new way of doing tournaments or the regionals as opposed to like cities and states and things like that. Do you like that moving forward? Do you think they should go back to the cities or states, or do you think it's just more getting the information out there and having more access to League Cups and getting that kind of stuff more settled?
I think that last part, what you just said with League Cups and getting better at getting them established, I think 100% going forward, that's where they're going to go, and they're going to get much better at identifying the stores that should have them, weed out the stores that maybe aren't handling them well. I know that this quarter, the last count that I saw, Carlos Perot post was about 200 League Cups scheduled this quarter around the country, around the world potentially. So that's fantastic. That's a
Yeah, we have our first one coming up this April 1st.
That's good. I think as time goes on, more places in each region get League Cups, and more places get used to scheduling them around each quarter. And hopefully TPCI kind of solves the logistical issues in getting the materials out so that people don't feel apprehensive about holding them in the first month of every quarter. Because right now, this quarter, organizers were asked not to schedule until March or April, just to make sure that we would have the material. So that kind of left February as a dead month. I don't think you want a dead month every quarter. I think you want all 3 months to be accessible for League Cups, to spread them out as much as possible, so that they're as accessible as possible to all players. So I think over time that'll get better. I like the direction that's going in. I much prefer it to cities. Cities was cool. I mean, as marathons were cool. Marathons are still very possible. They just require some coordination between the different organizers of the different stores. but I thought it was tough to fit them into to a 2 month space. There was a huge chunk of points that people could earn towards their invitation, and the pressure was on. Like you either had to show up, or you had to really hope that states or regionals went well later in the year for you. Having them spread out over the course of the year, having the League Cup spread out over the course of the year, I think is a pretty fantastic move, and I'm really excited to see once that program finds its legs. I'm excited to see what it looks like going forward. I do sort of miss that step up from League Cups, to go from a 50-person League Cup to a 700-person regional is frankly crazy. Like I don't think a League Cup at a small store prepares you to go sit down with 700 people and go through a regional for 12 hours. Yeah, exactly. In a best of three. So I missed that states step. I don't know what the solution is to that. Because of the way they spread out regionals this year, instead of obviously having them concentrated in 3 sets of weekends, there's a regional like every other weekend at this point. So states kind of loses a place to fit in there. I've seen people suggest that maybe you do one round of states, kind of like cities was before, and you do states all on one day, or one weekend, where it's a Saturday. It's one Saturday in March maybe. You just allow every state to have a state on that one Saturday, so that you don't get people traveling around state to state to try to collect points. But everybody gets a chance to have that kind of stepping stone. I don't know what the right answer is there. I just know that I miss it. I think that's intimidating for people who are getting involved in organized play, to step up from their local league cup, because they can. I mean, as a player, you can do league challenges and league cups and never leave your store. And then you go to a regional and you're like, I don't know what just happened. I just got hit by a freight train. So I miss that middle stepping stone.
Yeah, I know. Coming just from my experiences, we maybe have like 10 people at a league challenge. This will be our first league cup coming up, so we'll see how it goes. But moving into Dallas, where there was 500 masters, it was kind of a whirlwind.
Right. It's gigantic, and the room it's loud and it's bright, and it's just like your elbow room only, for a lot of the matches, and it's an intimidating experience. It's fun, most people come out of it and have a good time, but like I said, my experience in Lancaster which was my first regional, like I said, by round 7 I was like, I'm done. I'm mentally exhausted. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I was done because the only thing I'd been to before was states, and I was like, regionals can't be that much bigger. So anyway. Yeah, you're fine.
So obviously you've talked about Pokemon. You've got involved because of your son and him wanting to play, and then you wanted to be involved on his side. If he were to ever kind of transition away and kind of go into something else, or just get away from Pokemon, would you still be involved in the community?
It's a hard question. I would certainly want to be, but I would certainly be drawn in whatever direction he was drawn in, as well. I kind of got into this to be involved with him and to have a common interest in something we can do together. I've certainly had both my wife and other folks kind of joke around, like, is it your thing? Is it his thing? Whose thing is it? Because I have certainly gotten quite invested in the community, but I do also have a tendency to dive headlong into things that I'm involved with personally. So, for a few years before my son was involved with Pokemon, I was helping to run a young professionals nonprofit here in my area, where I joined, and a few months later I was on their board of directors, and within a year I was their president. So, I dive headlong. I like to be kind of passionately involved in things and fully invested in them, and not just kind of a casual bystander. So I don't know. I don't know. I haven't chased that question down yet. He's got 2 years left in juniors after this year. He seems to be aware of the potential rewards of being that junior, where you're kind of the oldest junior in the room. You're sweeping your divisions. Pokemon's paying you to go places. As long as you put the work in. So he hasn't made any indication that he's drifting out of it yet, and so I haven't kind of chased that line of thought down yet either. So
Kind of cross that bridge when you get there.
exactly, cross that bridge when I get there. Yeah, and in the meantime, just keep trying to do the good things I can do.
So did your son go with you and play in St. Louis?
He did. He did. He got 14th. It was a division of about 70 kids. It was a tight division. They played 7 rounds. The cuts were at 502 and 511. He had a second loss that he picked up along over the course of the day, but he practiced hard for it. He woke up in the morning not feeling well at all, and he pulled himself together for 14. So he picked up some points. He got a couple boxes. He's a happy camper, and that, like I said, that top cut division. I'm trying to think. I think the division had the top eight. I think 4 or 5 of them were like in the top 10 of juniors, and then there were a bunch of those, sprinkled throughout the division as well. So it was a very competitive division that day, and there were some really solid decks, and it's hard to make a meta call in that division because now in Masters you're in a situation where you could run. I don't know. You can run Night March and avoid Trevenant all day. Trevenant might be in like 10 places in top 32, but you might skate past it all day simply because out of 700 people, you're only going to play 9 of them. In juniors though, whatever decks are doing well are going to ride. You're almost always going to play them at some point. So if whatever you picked has a rough matchup, you're not going to skate past it. Eventually, you're going to have to face it down, and it's not going to go well. So that happened to him with one of the matchups, and
What deck did he play?
he played Turbo Dark. So he's been working a lot with Zach Lesage from Canada, who's a big fan of Turbo Dark. Had put the deck together last year for regionals, performed very well with it. Has continued to refine the list since then, and my son just plays. He really likes those decks that kind of explode onto the field. So he liked Volcanion earlier in the season with the max elixirs. He loves Turbo Dark and Expanded because it's just disgusting how much energy you can get on the field in one turn.
Oh, I know. I played against 3 of them.
Yeah, it's a tough deck. When it fires, it's great. But he hit a mirror matchup with a more experienced junior, which tripped him up, and then he hit Rainbow Road. And Rainbow Road is just if your opponent doesn't dead draw, that's also like getting hit by a freight train, except it sets up a little different. So his opponent did not dead draw that match. So like I said, he took his 2 losses, and there was no chance at cut by the time the standings worked out. But 14th in a field of 70 is a pretty strong showing. So
He said he's pretty close to getting his world invite, right?
he's about halfway there. Not counting, he hasn't gotten any league cups this quarter. Obviously, he hasn't gotten any for next quarter. So if he maxes those out, he just needs to pick up a few more points at either the regionals we have left or internationals, which the points are plentiful and deep in internationals because we're going to have gigantic internationals here in the U.S. So.
Okay, so for us here at the Dirt City Gym, obviously we're trying to be content creators, getting things out on the YouTube and things like that. We're doing articles and all that good stuff. We're trying not to spam Burbank as much as possible. Sometimes it's we can't help it when we do. But for you, being a player, a Poke Dad, things like that, what do you look for in content, or what's going to appeal to you?
So what appeals to me, I guess, is thoughtful interpretation of the metagame and an approach to the metagame. There are discussions about this quite often. Should different groups allow people to kind of spam their articles? Like, should they only be out there when they're of value? And how do you determine value? And how do you define value? I think that keeping it fresh and staying on top of what's new and interesting is good. There was a period of time last year where I swear like a month would go by and all you'd read about was Night March. And while Night March was the defining deck for the format for a lot of the last season, even if it wasn't the first place deck, everything was still being built with Night March in mind. Like you were either playing some variation of Night March, or you were playing something that had a great Night March matchup, like Waterbox, like Trevenant, like Greninja. You were Toad Bats, like you were playing stuff that could do well, so that you could be beating Night March. So everything was defined around it. But I didn't need to read over the course of a month. I didn't need to read or watch 10 different Night March variants. There are only so many things you could do with the deck.
Yeah, it's pretty much just a 55 card mirror.
Yeah, exactly. Like there are only so many things you can tech, and while it's a very techable deck and has a lot of potential, to do well depending on what you throw into it, it just got to the point where I was like, I don't need a a multi-paragraph analysis. I think the most recent iteration I've seen was like Maxie's Night March, which is cool, but it didn't have a huge paragraph on it because we didn't need it. And it's like, hey, it's Night March. Here's the core, and here are the pieces that make it Maxie's Night March, and here's why I threw Glade in there. Here's where Archeops helps. Like, go get them. So I think as content creators, if you can provide an interesting interpretation of the metagame and what your approach is going to be to it, I think that's good. If you can put a little bit of the thought process behind it, that's good, because that's the sort of thing that'll teach players to fish themselves, as it were. Like the give a man a fish versus teach a man to fish. If you teach them how to think about the stuff, it's more useful in the long run than just throwing it out there and saying, hey, here's Trevenant because it beats Night March. Have fun. That's not valid, not worthy, I think, of time. As a parent, I think what I look for in content creation is something that can be boiled down. It's kind of simple to understand, simple to roll with, and also family friendly, as it were. If you ever talk to Kirk at Super Rodcast, he can tell you that I called him out quite a few times because their podcast wasn't super family friendly. Not that I expected it to be, but I was just so stoked by what they were doing with their podcast that I was like almost mad that I couldn't share it with my son because the language was off the hook, and they've polished that up quite a bit since then, and we haven't quite gotten to the point where I listen to it with my son yet, but I still listen to it quite a bit, and I've noticed that kind of the professional presentation has changed a little bit, which is great. They're putting out a good product as well, especially in the podcast arena. There was nothing really competitive in the podcast arena. There are other good podcasts out there, but they're just not as focused on getting that competitive content out there. And I think something you can emulate there, and what I'd love to see from content creators is just collaboration between the content creators. I think it's really cool that they've been, pulling in like Omnipoke and Tablemon and the Someone's PC crew. And I think that the more that the community can connect with itself and do those cross collaborations, the stronger everybody's presentation is going to be, because you might think of a question for Andrew Wambolt at the Charizard Lounge that he's not heard before, or it might trigger him to answer it in a way that he hasn't thought of answering it before. So operating in a silo works great, but I think connecting everybody and putting them all together works even better. So I'd love to see more of that in the community. I don't think there's enough of it.
Yeah, well, as far as like the YouTube and things like that, when we first started, that was kind of one of the things we looked into getting into is, doing more of the adult level type content with the swearing and things like that. And then the people who run our local game store, like, oh yeah, our kids listen to your stuff. And at that point, we're like, oh crap. Okay, we got to tone it down. We can't be dropping the F-bombs and things like that on there. But kind of what we do with our Twitch stuff at night, we do that later at night. We try to keep that where it's more off the cuff, after dark kind of stuff, where it's more on the adult level, whereas our YouTube is more open and family friendly and that kind of level.
And I think that's okay there as long as you flag it and I mean, it's certain times of the day. If you're streaming it this time of the night, your East Coast kids are in bed. They better be. Even your West Coast kids should probably not be watching a stream at 8 o'clock at night. So you can kind of go, in that direction a little bit. But the YouTube stuff that's just kind of permanently available once you publish it, I agree with that. It's tough. I mean, but you're marketing in an arena that is a kid's cards game. So, eventually, like, whatever you put out there, like, some kid is probably going to stumble across it at some point. All the article websites have to deal with it. The forums have to deal with it. Our Facebook group has to deal with it. Every once in a while, I see, like, a brand new senior, like, that probably just got Facebook, like, they'll request to join Verbank. And I'm like, I know that name. And that kid's, like, 11. And it's probably not the best place for them. But it's just, it comes with the territory. So you kind of got to market to that. But with Twitch, like I said, yeah, it's tough. I mean, there's a story running around. I don't know if you're familiar with Hey Trainer, if you've seen John Kettler's new site, but that was it was kind of a revitalization of an old site, and I don't know if you saw Doug taking pictures, Doug Morsoli in St. Louis, running around with his camera. His daughter's been playing the game for 9 years now, and at some point, Hey Trainer found out that Sydney, his daughter, was reading Hey Trainer, and they were like all shocked because the way they talk and they interacted on the Hey Trainer forums, and she told them that not to worry, that she prays for them every night. So
Well, it gets a little eye-opening. You need to think about what you're saying whenever you find out that kids are listening.
exactly, it does. So I think they locked down some pieces of the forum and cleaned up the presentation, and yeah. So anyway, but it's good stuff.
Well, I just wanted to thank you again for taking your time out of your day to come and sit and talk with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope it was helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So, is there any plugs you want to make for yourself where people can go find you?
Yeah, I don't really do a whole ton of personalized social media. I'm pretty much on Facebook. So if people have questions about anything, they're more than welcome to reach out to me and ask me. They can tag me in a post. I get tagged plenty, so I'm used to catching them and reading them and saying something about them. So people are always welcome to reach out to me.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to be one of the most popular people on Facebook with as much as you get tagged on like Verbank.
That's pretty much it. It's a great icebreaker. Almost everybody I go to, will I say, hey, like, oh, that's you, your will post, and it kind of eliminates any awkwardness about meeting. So it's been a great way to meet people in the community. And I would invite anyone, like I said, if they have questions, they can reach out, they can throw me a message, they can tag me, they can do whatever. But that's the best way to get a hold of me if anybody has a question or something they want to run by me.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for coming out and talking with us tonight.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, we'll catch you later.
You too.